Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Media Roundtable. I am Giles Martin, EVP of Strategy at Oxford Road, and I am here to introduce a presentation that I gave at the CAO Summit back in July at the Terranea Resort in Southern California. Before we get into the presentation, I wanted to give you a little bit of context on why we felt this project needed to happen and why now. Over the past year, one of the loudest conversations in podcasting has been about video. Everyone's talking about it. I'm sure you've been talking about it, and specifically YouTube, as that's where the majority of video impressions are falling right now. Obviously, there's a lot of audience consumption there, and many creators are obviously finding the most reach on YouTube. And so inevitably, audiences are there and advertisers are being asked to put their podcast investments on the YouTube side as well. But while investment's growing, the visibility isn't there yet. And the tools most marketers are relying on to evaluate performance in YouTube, they simply don't work in YouTube. And that's the issue here. There's a big gap between where the budgets are going and what we can actually measure. And obviously for us as an agency, we feel a strong sense of urgency to find solutions to this measurement problem for our clients. And we've considered various different options, and we do actually have other methodologies that we're exploring and should be able to release further studies and white papers about later this year. But for now, we have simply been exploring different partnerships and different technologies to try and find a solution that's going to bring some visibility to this YouTube performance. And we obviously haven't cracked the nut yet, but we do feel we found something that really has some interesting results, shows some interesting promise, and really sort of points the way to a new era of possibilities for podcast YouTube measurement. So really, really excited to present this, and let's get into it. So we're going to present something today which I really think is going to be interesting to everyone. We believe it's an industry first piece of work. It's something that is pioneering and potentially presents a new path forward for measuring simulcasts. We're going to be focused on YouTube for the purposes of this case study. Obviously, simulcast extends beyond that, but YouTube tends to get a lot of attention, and this is a stat that I just wanted to touch on briefly that's got a lot of attention in the industry recently. The latest Cumulus and Westwood One report saying 39% of people now are saying that YouTube is their preferred platform for podcasters, and I think it's caused quite a bit of hand-wringing in the industry, but myth-busting is one of my favorite things to do, and about half of those people are also using Spotify, either regularly or occasionally. Another quarter of them are using Pandora or Amazon or iHeart. And if you actually look at the daily use, YouTube is used about 26% by about 26% of the people, Spotify 28%, Apple 21%. So YouTube is not sort of standing above the industry, looking down like a Leviathan, but obviously it's a critically important issue for marketers to get a better sense of understanding how it's working for podcasts. And as Dan touched on earlier, this is a different way of looking at that stat. Almost half of the brands in our study said that they would add another 25% to their podcast budget if YouTube offered measurement that was on par with what they are using today. If you want to measure a video podcast today, typically are restricted to using a vanity URL or a promo code. We all know that those do not capture the true response of your investment. And what we really have as a best practice in the industry is taking the response rates from the audio side of your simulcast buy and applying those audio response rates to the video impressions, which I think is the best assumption we have. It does make sense, but obviously it's a pretty limited assumption, and it's one we want to break past. So we view it incumbent on us at Oxford Road to find solutions for the industry. We're working on a couple of things that we hope to present over the back half of this year. This is the first one, and we have been working with Keith and his team very closely on this, and I want to hand over to him to spend a few minutes telling us about his platform, which is central to the effort here.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. As Dan mentioned, I did serve for 16 years as Chief Analytics and Insights Officer at Endeavor. So I am a lifelong data wonk, 35 years and gray hair to prove it. It's all about the data. It is the oil of the industry. And I've lived through the TV Nielsen era. This is now an emerging podcasting phenomenon that is desperate to get tracked appropriately, to build in those attribution models that are going to prove the efficacy of a marketer engaging in the platform overall. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really here to kind of introduce the Media Identity Graph, or MIDG. We call it MIDG for short, the Media Identity Graph. And really what that is based on is an impressive panel of zero-party data. Zero-party data is an emerging new sort of data ecosystem that's out there. Imagine the power of a Google and a Facebook and a Netflix, but really democratized for anyone in the room that might want to leverage it and use it. And what that is really a solution that leverages consumer clickstream data and data intelligence 24/7, 365. So once a panelist is in the zero-party data ecosystem, we are seeing every click, every transaction, every moment of their life in this very attention-diffused economy that we live in. It's impossible to survey everything and get a legit insight. But if you actually see what they're touching on a micro level, every click, it really unlocks a whole range of insights you can play with. We actually say that this data is the raw truth of every click, view, and purchase tracked across all devices and all platforms. There are three key components to zero-party data. Number one, it's direct observational data. It's not survey-based. There is no truncated data. It is clickstream at scale. It is just a massive repository of insight. How you want to lean into it and leverage it is really up to how we collaborate, work together. Number two, it's real-time insights. It's campaign ready. You can war room this data if you want and have intelligence the next hour, the next day related to a campaign. And we track granular interactions. MIDG sees everything the panelist is doing, period. Everything they're touching, every device, every platform, all day, every day. So how does this work? So foundationally, MIDG was born out of a firm called Crosswalk, which has specialized in providing zero-party data to private equity shops and hedge funds for years. So it's not a new thing, it's not a new tool, it's not a new invention. It's actually been leveraged by big bankers making big bets on Wall Street for a long time. The idea was to kind of repurpose that for new sectors and new industries. So it's vetted, efficacious data. It's now really kind of ready for prime time and a whole new ecosystem. So how does this kind of work? How does someone kind of go through this process? So panelists are recruited via major brand partnerships. Samples include all your mall stores, it's the BMWs, the Dick's Sporting Goods, the Michael Kors. They're really enticed through these partnerships that kind of validate the fact that we're not scraping information or sort of being a little shady about how we get you into the panel. But major brands are our partners. It's a trade back. They get a little bit of love. They get a little bit of data for that sort of conduit into a panelist. Once the panelist opts in, again, nothing is scraped, and they download one extension. I'd like to stress that MIDG is GDPR, CCPA, COPA, and HIPAA compliant. The issue around sort of doing this with sort of nobility and ethics is a huge issue for MIDG and all the owners of MIDG and how we kind of operate the brand and the business. All consumer devices are then connected TVs, mobile phones, tablets, gaming consoles are mapped in the background basically by your sort of everyday IDs, your Netflix password, your Amazon purchases. So once someone downloads that one extension once, we kind of in the background sort of vet all the devices in their personal ecosystem or the entire family's ecosystem and bring them into the panel. Panelists then receive a great offer for participating, such as a 20% off coupon. There's not a website you've gone to. Many of you own these websites as well, where if you sign up for something or you purchase something, hey, there's a 15% off, there's a 20% off. So again, MIDG gets validated by a major brand saying, hey, we're working with this partner, and they're our gateway into this sort of deeper insight of working with you and giving you what you want to enhance your experience. The panel right now is 30 million Americans strong. And of that 30 million, 10 million has been cut into a general pop sample. So it does scale to a national platform where you can actually scale up to national insights from a census basis or any type of level where you want to kind of scale up, basically. Some clients do want to look at the full 30 million. Hey, just give me the whole shebang. I'm a digitally native company. I only care about those people that are online anyway. If you're more like traditional in a sense, you might want to go with the GenPop 10 million sample as well. Basically, MIDG has been working with Oxford Road to identify new pathways to accurately access podcast commercial attribution. That's the assignment that we're working on together. And then moving forward here, there are really, how do we sort of highlight this and make it sort of pithy here? There are 3 years worth of clickstream data in the database already. Again, this system has been live for years with Wall Street. So you can really interestingly look backwards in time. Some systems you have a difficulty in doing that. If you actually want to compare something you're doing today to something you did a year, 2, 3 years ago, that's actually possible. All that data, those trillions of clickstream transactions are warehoused and ready and available to use. Marketers also can predefine what makes someone a prospect, a fan, or a consumer. You can actually control how many touches, what pathway they took. The data's raw, so you can kind of architect what you define as being synonymous with your typical archetypical consumer for your particular brand. MIDG offers a wide array of KPIs. This is obviously, Dan spoke about this earlier. What do you want to tackle? How do you want to tackle it from a research and analytics perspective? There's impressions, there's engagements, there's visitation rates, time spent, share of voice, category and competitive landscape. This I want to stress, and we actually have some highlights about this in a moment. Not only can we look at your brand, we can look at your complete competitive landscape as well, either by category or specific targeted competitor. Again, all the data is in the system 3 years going back. If you want to see week by week, month by month, what you're doing is comparing to your competitive landscape, utterly doable with MIDG data. There's consumer profiling, interest adjacencies, and ultimately attribution is the goal. MIDG is platform agnostic, title level capable, and can track and report on confirmed purchase behavior across specific brand sites as well as e-commerce platforms. It's important to stress that MIDG has the ability and has a lens into carts and baskets. So not just top line, but all the way down to what you bought at an Amazon or what you bought at a Walmart.
Thanks, Keith. So to our knowledge, a data set like this has not been used in podcast or audio attribution before. And obviously the insight was this could be something that could be used to apply to YouTube to get us a look inside that walled garden and perhaps give us a first look at what those video-based responses might look like. So for this pilot project, we looked at 17 shows where we had host-read ads in an audio environment, and then we also looked to find those same host-read ads, but in the YouTube environment. And we looked at an observation period of September to December 2024, around 3.5 million views across all of these episodes on YouTube. The size of the different episodes varied quite significantly, from large shows with over 1 million impressions to ones with perhaps only 10,000. And that's, I think, just worth calling out because we're going to be presenting these results at an aggregate level. Obviously, an ideal state would be to be able to look at those shows on an individual basis. And then one of the key questions that arises is, well, how granular can we go? Like, how small a show can we track? Or do we have to have a certain threshold that we can measure above? So the process that we went through was, first of all, to identify the YouTube exposed audience. So what that really means is people who visited the URLs on YouTube hosting those specific episodes. And within the panel, this is the 10 million panel, the nationally representative panel, we found 165,000 people who had visited those URLs across the whole set of episodes. And so then what we did is we basically carved off that group of people and we started to look at their pre and post visitation rates to a client site. We're only looking at the top of the funnel for this initial study. Again, getting further down the funnel will be a valuable next step, of course. So we looked at the percentage of the audience visiting the client site in the pre-period and compared that to the percentage of them visiting in the observation period to estimate the lift in visitation. And then finally, as Keith was just alluding to, we compared those to some category benchmarks, which I think is a really interesting and valuable part of this data set, which we're going to talk more about in a moment. what we found was 8.5% of the audience visited the client's site in the pre-period. This is a 4-month pre-period, so it's quite a long period. 9.1% in the post, which is an 8% lift in visitation rate. A couple of comments on these numbers. These visitation rates are high. Again, it's a 4-month period, so it's a long period. It's also a very popular or even ubiquitous category, which has a lot of online engagement. And I don't know, an 8% visitation rate might strike some of you as not very big, but I think you need to bear in mind the size of the category and the amount of media spend involved. Those are typically really important variables when you're considering, how much lift you would typically expect. So to our knowledge, this is the first time that YouTube podcast impressions have been able to be specifically measured, and we've been able to put a number on what they have contributed to a client's business. And then this point about being able to track category activity. So we actually looked at 10 other brands in the category. And you can see some of these brands are very large and dominate, and there's sort of 3 or 4 that really have a lot of market share, and then there are a lot of tiny brands in this category. And we're able to see the visitation rates for all of these brands in the pre-period and in the post-period. And you can see, if you just look down that list, that a lot of these brands actually are sort of pretty flat or even down over the post-period.
And I think, just to chime in for a moment,
Yeah.
I think this is really interesting because if you are a incumbent blue chip brand, you have a certain list of objectives and see certain key KPIs that are associated with those objectives. If you're an insurgent brand trying to break into the marketplace, again, you might be on the smaller side. You're trying to get some new heat going for a brand or maybe a new particular launch. We can actually track at that more micro level, and you can actually see what that delta of growth might be for yours versus the competition, even though they might have vastly greater scale as an operator.
And one other great application here, thinking about the Byron Sharp principles, like light category buyers are typically the most profitable people to target. And so this way you can build a really nice profile of light category buyers by actually observing their visitation rates and purchase rates to other sites in the category. So there's just an enormous amount of potential for this data, not just with attribution, but beyond that as well. And this is just a visual of those changes that we're seeing on the other brands in the category. So you can see the client with an 8% increase. We had a couple of other brands that also saw an increase in the post period compared to the pre-period, but the vast majority of brands in the category saw a decline in this period. The average category movement is minus 4% over the same period. So, whether or not you look at that lift as 8% or perhaps more like 12 to 13%, I think is at your own discretion and the conversation you want to have with your attribution consultants. But I think I would probably incorporate the category movement here because it's pretty convergent and sort of really does suggest that we've bucked a trend there. So perhaps the lift might be considered even more than 8%.
And MIDG believes that this marketplace contextualization is really where the action's at.
Yeah. So a summary here and next steps. We're really excited with this. It's just a pilot project. We're just getting started here. What we really want to do is get you all excited about this, and hopefully there are 1 or 2 or more of you who are really interested in exploring this further. We are really, really keen to work with more brands on this to get more sample, to understand what type of consistency there is in the data. We obviously want to take the MIDG data set and benchmark those results against the audio impressions of the same shows. That's a critically important next step. We want to use the MIDG data for that so that it's a true apples to apples comparison of video and audio within their environment. So please, come and we don't have time for questions now, but if you have questions,
find me as well. Yeah.
Please come and find us afterwards. We'd love to talk with you. Or you can email me at giles@oxfordroad.com. And let's talk about this, and let's talk about partnering on doing something moving forward, because it's a really important challenge for the industry, but this could really be the start of something exciting. So thanks very much.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our episode for this week. Thank you very much for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road, where we want you to succeed in audio and creator-based media to use influence for good. As members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but edify, to build bridges across differences and preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. If you're a marketer looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road, by visiting oxfordroad.com and subscribing to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any feedback or suggestions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@mediaroundtable.com. And finally, a quick plug for the Ad Infinitum podcast. Ad Infinitum is created by our very own VP of Creative Services, Stu Redwine. It's our creative focused podcast, and we believe it is the only podcast in the world focused on making scripts and spots for audio perform as well as they can possibly be made to perform. So uniquely focused content on that. Each episode breaks down real, recent audio ads from real industry experts, featuring fabulous experts like Amanda DiMarco from Veritonic, Dallas Taylor from 20,000 Hertz, and Richard Shotton, author of The Choice Factory. Episodes feature amazing guests like Stephen Abraham and Giles Martin from Oxford Road. So tune in and get some more of them over there. Season 2 is underway. Thank you again to Haley, Ruby, Bianca, Kyle, Prince, Rob, Neil, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.